What else? Yo, it's the Lord Jose Rabbit Messiah. I thought it would be a good idea because there's not so many videos on YouTube regarding it. So I thought I should tell you how to learn about your rights and about the law in Canada. Um, I'm not a legal expert, and I'm not talking about all kinds of statutory law because the codes and the acts and the statutes are virtually endless. But in Canada, we have something that's called the Supreme Law, and that Supreme Law is the Constitution. And that Constitution is made up of a certain number of acts, but predominantly it is made of the 1867 Act, which was the establishment of four or five provinces coming together to make Canada. But then, even more importantly for us today, is the 1982 Act, which is the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So let's just see if we can get this stuff to show up, because I'm going to show you how to find all this or how prove to you the answers to these questions.
According to the Constitution Acts, 1867 to 1982 to 52, the Constitution of Canada is the supreme law of Canada, and any law that is inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution is, to the extent of the inconsistency, of no force or effect.
Right on. So, uh, the other thing that's important to note is that we also have something in Canada called the Canadian Bill of Rights, which was written in 1960. It was an attempt to put in some sort of document all the human rights that we desire and how we come about them in this country. But the thing is, it's only a federal document, so it's not entrenched like the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But it's not disannulled. It's not excluded. There's been no act of parliament to remove it from power. Everything written in the Bill of Rights is still in effect. But it's only a federal document. So, still, the Canadian Bill of Rights.
According to Wikipedia, the Canadian Bill of Rights is a federal statute and Bill of Rights enacted by the Parliament of Canada on August 10, 1960.
It provides Canadians with certain rights at Canadian federal law in relation to other federal statutes. Okay, so we don't want to find it on Wikipedia right now. Yeah, I didn't want that to happen.
According to Wikipedia, the Canadian
So, something very important about the Canadian Bill of Rights is the preamble. That's going to give you the first bit of information you need to understand it. Where we're actually coming from in Canada. Okay, so the Canadian Bill of Rights. Let's see. An act for the recognition and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Okay. The Parliament of Canada affirming that Canadian nation is founded upon principles that acknowledge the supremacy of God, the dignity and worth of the human person, and the position of a family in a society of free men and free institutions. Affirming also that men and institutions remain free only when freedom is founded upon respect for moral and spiritual values and the rule of law, and being desirous of enshrining these principles and the human rights and fundamental freedoms derived from them in a Bill of Rights which shall reflect the respect of Parliament for its constitutional authority and which shall ensure the protection of these rights and freedoms in Canada. Therefore, Her Majesty, by and with the advice of and consent of the Senate and House of Commons of Canada, enacts as follows. See, now I haven't gone through all of the Bill of Rights yet, but it's the same setup. It's the same method of understanding. See, every section is numbered, and then if there's different provisions or subsections, they'll be lettered. Okay, so that being said, the more important thing to note right now is
According to Connecticut General Assembly, the Canadian Charter or Rights and Freedoms is the equivalent to our Bill of Rights. Both guarantee the right to freedom of speech in the press, peaceably assemble, travel, due process, privacy, an attorney and speedy trial in criminal cases, and trial by jury in certain cases.
Okay. So anyways, moving on. Where we're going to find that is this website here. This is where you find all the legal information that you want in Canada. It's right here at justice.gc.ca. Okay, every single criminal act is written down here. And there's a lot of other stuff here too. So, bringing it up, we see that we have here the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. Now, a lot of people get that confused and think that they're two supreme terms. They are not. There's the supremacy of God, that's one, and the other is the rule of law. See, the rule is not some other thing but law. The supremacy is not some other thing but God. Then we have the 34 sections of the Constitution here. Actually, there's more added now. But essentially, the Canadian Charter was written with 34 sections. And when you look at them, you see that they're written down the exact same way that I said. You have your basic right there. Let's see, number 1, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. Okay. Section 2, A, B, C, D. Freedom of conscience and religion. Freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. Freedom of peaceful assembly and freedom of association. Okay. Now, going through the Constitution, you find that basically the rights that we are most concerned about go from Section 2 to Section 15, which is equality. But the other section to be noted as frequent would be Section 7, which is the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. So there's that. But those sections are not very clear as to what it all means. So if you want to know what it means, you have to go to one other place, because there's a book written that describes the Constitution. And that book is called Fundamental Justice. See, so if we want to learn about our religious rights,
According to Department of Justice, purpose. The purpose of Section 2A is to prevent interference with profoundly held personal beliefs that govern one's perception of oneself, humankind, nature, and, in some cases, a higher or different order of being, R.
Okay, so going back to the same website. Oh, actually, sorry, this is justice.gc.ca. We find here the definition or the description of the right. Just to give you a brief preview. Provision: everyone has the following fundamental freedoms: freedom of conscience and religion. So he talks about other bills or acts or charters that have been written that are legally binding on Canada, as well as not legally binding in Canada. So he explains the purpose. The purpose of Section 2A is to prevent interference with profoundly held personal beliefs that govern one's perception of oneself, humankind, nature, and in some cases, a higher or different order of being. So, when you're reading, you're going to find that it's full of citations. This is the meaty information that you want as a layman. Then here's where all that essentially was worked out. Okay, then you go to the analysis. It talks about the general of it, and then it'll talk about methods. It'll talk about Let's get back to it. Let's see here. Any certain tests or criteria that they have for meeting the law or for meeting the Inquisition. See here, citation, media information, citation. Actually, this is a long section of no citation. Here we go. Citation, right? Section, citation. You just got to pick through it. So again, section 2.
According to Department of Justice, everyone has the right to life, liberty and security of the person and the right not to be deprived thereof except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice.
The principles of fundamental justice, which is what we're reading right now. So life, liberty, security of the person. And again, it's ordered the same way. Purpose analysis here, let's see. Similar provisions. Similar provisions may be found in the following Canadian laws and international instruments binding on Canada. See also the following international, regional, and comparative law instruments that are not legally binding on Canada. Back into the purpose, the analysis. Let's see. Section 7 involves a 2-step analysis. Is there an infringement of one of the 3 protected interests? That is to say, deprivation of life, liberty, and security of the person. And is the deprivation in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice? And you'll find that this is very forgiving and very giving to the person. It really protects people, like really. But you have to understand it. And when you have a lawyer, he's going through the Constitution, he's going through fundamental justice to find out how he's going to protect you, or what rights you have or what you've done or have not done. So the other thing that you want to know is that there's 3 main things that give body to your right, or that you must be satisfying in order to call your right legitimate. And those 3 purposes are democratic discourse, which is to speak freely to everybody for the communication of ideas. Then there's truth finding, which is so that you might learn the truth about life. Not so that you might get caught up in the way and try to have to learn how to do things like everybody else. No, it's truth finding. Then the third one is self-fulfillment. Now again, self-fulfillment is not just a matter of whatever you think you get to do it, because you have to have some concept of what self actually means. You have to be fulfilling yourself, not just wild or ludicrous imaginations. So following that suit, you should be able to find your way, even your place in the country of Canada, in the Constitution. Because Canada, the Constitution is written for the individual. We are a pluralistic nation of free individuals. So what that means is expecting people to act a certain way, calling people normal or not. That means absolutely nothing here. The only thing that's normal here is how we treat people. Right. So the other thing is, if somebody's saying stuff, somebody might pipe up and say, well, some people don't want to hear that. Well, in Canada, that doesn't matter, because your right to speak and express is far more important than your right to not want to see somebody's expressions. But of course, we have times and places for everything. So just because you're free to say something in the open square doesn't mean you're free to say it in, somebody else's house or on private property, essentially. If there's limitations on the private property, then your rights are limited in that case. So there you go. You can find all this information, as I just told you, justice.gc.ca and Lois Laws, justice.gc.ca. And it's in the Constitution and it's in fundamental justice. Also, there's the Bill of Rights. All right. HMC Lord Isaiah Rabati Messiah, One Mango Nitsi, Woodao Sheo.